Welcome to Milan Recording Studios. My name is James Pavel Chakras, and in today's video, I have something that is unlike anything I've ever had before at the studio. This is basically a time capsule. This whole case, everything that's inside of it, is basically a time capsule from 1981, and what is inside of this time capsule is a 40-year-old Casiotone 202 that has never been played. At least I'm pretty sure it's never been played. It is in like-new condition, and the power cable, I'll put a picture of it on screen, when it came in the mail, the power cable was wrapped up in such a way that no normal human would, and I'm pretty sure that that's because that's how it came from Casio's factory, and that for some reason this instrument just never got played. It got sealed away inside of its case with all of the original paperwork and manuals and brochures, and even the expression pedal and the damper pedal that came with it also came with the box, and it even came with a stand as well that would have originally come with it. So basically this is a time capsule from 1981, and I'm pretty excited to check this out. So this is the Casiotone 202, and what is the Casiotone 202? Well, what's really cool about it is it was basically one of Casio's earliest keyboard instruments they ever made. In 1980, Casio came out with the Casiotone 201, which was their very first electronic keyboard musical instrument ever. Before that, all there was a musical calculator. So in 1980, the 201 came out, and it was pretty well liked. And in the following year, in 1981, they came out with its successor, the 202, which had extra sounds, a slightly different user interface, and that's kind of about the only differences. It also has the cool color scheme that you're seeing here, the 202, with the black top panel and the silver accents, that I think actually still looks pretty modern to this day. The Casiotone 202 and the 201 both had a version that was kind of like a wood tone, which was really super 80s, which I don't think has aged all that well in my personal opinion. But the black and the silver color combo looks really, really good, even to this day. So again, what is the 202? Well, basically it's pretty much a synth. It's not a synth in the aspect of what many of us think when we think of a synth. When I think of a synth, I think of like a Moog or an Arturia, where you can customize every single aspect of the wavelength and all that stuff. This doesn't do that. This just has a bunch of pre-programmed sounds in here. It's got 49 of them, but they are synthesized tones. They aren't samples or anything like that. I believe the synthesis engine that Casio used here was called consonant vowel synthesis, and it's not a very commonly used synthesis method, which makes these interesting as well. I know that's what they used in the 201, and I think that stayed true to the 202 as well, but I'm not a synth expert, to be honest with you. I just got this because I thought it was really, really cool that it was brand new in the case and had never been played. And as you can see, it came with all of the original brochures as well. This here is the owner's manual. The operation of the instrument is remarkably simple, and the reason it's so thick is because it's in like 5 different languages. So the English section of the owner's manual is only about, let me see here. There it is. That's German. So that's all you need to know to operate the M202. Not the M202, just the Casiotone 202. I keep wanting to put the M in front of the name, and I'm not sure why, but I think the reason I want to is because of this guy here. This is a little advertisement that came with the 202 that was advertising another Casio product that they made at the time called the M10. And this little brochure is really funny. Maybe I'll put a picture of it up on screen. It says, "Play music by number on a real keyboard instrument. If you've had fun playing music by number on your Casio Melody Calculator, you'll have more fun playing music by number on the new, exciting Casiotone M10. So it seems to me that the M10 was basically made for beginners. It had music by number on it, and it would teach you how to play. And this, the 202, I'm thinking would be a much more professional level instrument. Although the sounds certainly aren't professional by today's standard, the build quality of this is definitely professional, and the appearance and the presentation of this instrument, as you can see, is certainly professional. It even came with its own cleaning cloth that is still here in the box, and it also has a music desk, or as Casio calls it in the owner's manual, a score holder. So it's kind of interesting that from the very beginning, Casio appeared to be focused on quality build and just a quality presentation. They were going for a professional aesthetic with this instrument. And another way you can tell that this was meant to be a professional instrument is that it doesn't just come with a sustain pedal, but also an expression pedal. And the sustain pedal is by far the strangest, but also one of my favorite damper pedals, sustain pedals I've ever seen before. This is it. This is the sustain pedal that would have come with the the 202, and it looks super, super weird. It looks like something you'd see, I don't know, like on the, I don't know what it looks like. It just looks super weird. And this is what you push to get sustain. It's not a pedal like you'd find on a modern digital piano. It's just this weird kind of rubbery nubbin thing that you push in with your foot, and it sustains the sound. And it actually works really well. The build quality of this, although it looks super weird, the build quality is solid. You've got a really thick metal underside. The rubber here is very thick, although it hasn't aged perfectly. It was kept outside of the case. And it's got some minor cracking up here because it flexes, and it's 40 years old. But it still works perfectly, and it doesn't slide across the floor, which is a really big thing with damper pedals. You got this big flat part that your heel sits on, which is part of the reason it doesn't move. And although it's really weird and objectively ugly, I actually really like it. It works great. And then it also comes with this expression pedal as well, that I don't like quite as much because it doesn't work all that well. It does work perfectly as intended. It just isn't the best expression pedal, but here you have it. It does have a nice feel to the pedal itself. It just doesn't have a lot of play, so you can't get really nice, smooth increases in volume. It just kind of jumps, and it's not the best sound. However, the build quality of this is also amazing, and there's a knob on the back here that customizes the minimum volume, and that knob itself has a really quality feel. It's like one of the best feeling knobs I've ever felt in my life. So I think it's pretty obvious that Casio really was going for a professional aesthetic and a professional presentation with this instrument. Whether people use these in a professional setting or not, I am not sure. And how, because by today's standards, the sounds in this are objectively cheesy, although there is kind of a cool 80s charm to them. So I don't know if people would have used this in a professional setting and gone, oh yes, this sounds good because it was competitive with other digital instruments at the time, or not. However, this was Casio's attempt at creating a digital instrument, and I honestly think they did quite a good job. I am actually kind of a fan. And what's kind of funny is that they don't actually label it as being a synth or a electric piano or an electronic keyboard or a keyboard. They simply label it as the Casiotone 202 electronic musical instrument. So I think it's about time we hear what this electronic musical instrument is and hear how it sounds, and I'll run you through what the controls do, and we'll check out most, if not all, of its 49 built-in sounds, and we'll just have some fun with it. Let's go do that. So now the Casiotone 202 is out of the case and it is fully ready to be played. I have left the score holder on the instrument because I think it looks kind of cool. It's got the M shape, but it's actually quite functional for music. It doesn't look like it would be with the hole in the middle and being just a piece of wire, but I put some loose papers up there and it worked just fine, and I put a book up there and it also worked just fine. So it's actually a very adequate score holder. So what we're going to be talking about here is the user interface and how you interact with the instrument, as well as what it sounds like, and I'll run you through some, if not all, of the sounds. It has 49 different sounds, which was an upgrade of the 201, which I think had about 26 or something. So the 202 has extra sounds over the original Casiotone 201, so we're going to be taking a look at some of these. Now keep in mind, these are not samples. These are all synthesized sounds that are, I guess, supposed to represent these instruments. Some of them come somewhat close and others of them don't come close at all. On the original 201, very few, if not any, of the sounds were actually given any type of a name. I believe electric piano was labeled on the 201, but none of the other sounds were labeled piano or clavichord or clarinet like on this instrument. So, first of all, before we get around to playing it, how do you use it? Well, it's very simple. First of all, on this end, you have your power switch, and that obviously is your power switch. This up here is how you select sounds, and when I get around to playing, I'll talk more about that, but essentially you have 4 tone memories, and these are basically like presets. So you can program any type of sound to go on any one of these 4 different sounds. Some people on the internet call these useless because there's only 4 of them, but I think it's a pretty cool addition, so if you wanted to change sounds during a live set or just for fun, you can set your 4 favorite sounds of the Casiotone 202 and switch between them. I tend to put bass on 4. There's 2 different bass sounds on here, and I like them both equally for different things. So I usually will have one of the bass sounds set to number 4, and then the piano I usually have set to 1, and then 2 and 3 I just put whatever on. This little dial here, or slider, is used to change the sounds, and again, I will talk more about that in a little bit, so we'll return to how that works in a second. Down here, you have the more self-explanatory things. You have your volume, which is right here. It does volume things. You have your sustain switch, which basically turns on and off sustain. Now, this is different from the sustain that the pedal does. The sustain is kind of like a shorter, smaller sustain that you might want to use if you don't have your sustain pedal with you. And so basically, it just adds a longer decay to the end of each note. I personally don't like the sound of it, but it is here, and I'll demonstrate it in a little bit. And something else I will demonstrate in a little bit is the vibrato. And there's actually 3 different types of vibrato. You have off in the top position, you have a slow, deep type of vibrato, you have a fast, deep, and a fast, slight. And so that's, the type of vibrato that you have. I think the order would be a little bit better if fast, slight went before slow deep, perhaps, because the fast slight is very, very, very subtle. You can barely hear it, but it is actually there. So you've got the slow deep, you've got the fast deep, and then the fast slight. And since this is so subtle, I think it might have made a little bit more sense to put it between the off position and the slow deep to kind of have a gradient of least amount of vibrato to most amount of vibrato. But it is what it is, and there you have the vibrato. And that is how you use the Casiotone 202. It is one of the simplest instruments I have ever featured on this channel to use, besides a piano, which has no different types of sounds. Now, changing the sounds on this is what really piqued my attention with this instrument, because it's so interesting. I was watching a video of these online when I ordered this, and I was like, changing the sounds is so unique. And in one sense, it's really stupid, and in another sense, it's actually just really cool because it's so unique and original of a way to change sounds. So, as you can see, there's all kinds of letters written above the keys, and each one of these pertains to the sounds. So all of the white keys are plucked, percussive types of sounds. The first one over here is piano. You got electric piano, piano 2, funky clavinet, celesta, clavichord, which is a struck string instrument, harpsichord, which is a plucked string instrument, of course, synth sound, harp sounds, koto and Japanese ethnic instruments, guitar sounds, banjos, guitars, and electric guitars, and finally the electric bass up in the top. So all of your plucked sounds are here, and then all of your permanently sustaining instruments, your organs, your strings, all of those are found on the black keys. So you've got pipe organs down here, electric organ, you got bandonion and accordion, bagpipe, oboe, clarinet, flute, shakuhachi, another Japanese instrument. You've got the horns, you got flugelhorns, trumpets, brass, bass, cello, viola, and violin. So all of your permanent sustaining instruments are on the top, and all of your plucked percussive instruments that have a decay to them are on the bottom. So it's actually a pretty interesting layout. Chromatically, it makes little sense, but in that regard, it makes a lot of sense. So to change the sound, how do you do it? Well, you take this slider that I mentioned earlier, and you put it in the set position. Then, I'm going to put it on this tone memory, you can just push any one of these keys, and what happens is each key becomes a preview of what that sound will be. So, for example, I'm going to do a chromatic scale and play you every single... No, actually, I won't do chromatic. I'm going to do all the white keys and then all the black keys. So those are a little sample of all the different sounds of the instrument. So the way this works is you just choose one and you push it, and then you push this back into the play mode, and then that will take whatever sound that is and spread it across the entire keyboard like a normal instrument. So say, for example, we wanted to use the violin sound. Now everything is violin sound. And it doesn't really sound like a violin per se, but it is an interesting type of sound, especially when you add in the vibrato, and that is how you change sounds. So in a sense, it's entirely stupid, because if you wanted to change to a new sound, if you were performing live, say, for example, and you want to add in the guitar sound, you'd have to stop what you're doing, put this, make a noise that's probably not going to be in the key, switch that back, and now you have your guitar tone. So in that regard, it's completely stupid. But yet at the same time, I think it's a really novel approach to changing sounds. And in a sense, I think it's kind of clever. What I do like is the tone memory that allows you to just simply be able to select any of the sounds, and put your 4 favorites on here, and then just switch between the two relatively easily. In modern digital pianos, a thing people often want is seamless sound switching, which is where you hold the key down and you're playing a sound, and you switch to a different sound, and your previous sound holds over and blends seamlessly into the next sound. A lot of digital pianos, even today, don't do that, and this one doesn't do it, but it actually does something even worse. Instead of just stopping the sound when you switch sounds, it actually re-triggers the sound every time you switch tone memories. Which, of course, is not quite ideal. And although it sounds like I'm kind of just saying nothing but bad things about this instrument, I actually do like it. I think it's a really cool, interesting, quirky look back at 1981, and it really is like a time capsule. It's in perfect condition, and as far as aesthetic things are concerned, it almost looks like a modern instrument. It almost does. I could really imagine Casio coming out with like a retro version that looks similar but has new, more modern features and better sounds, and maybe a few that harken back to these days. It's really, really interesting. Anyway, let's check out the piano sound here. And I'll just play a little chord progression here, and you'll get to hear what the piano sounds like in context of like music or something. Here we go. So that is the piano sound. As you can hear, it doesn't sound like a piano, but it kind of has an interesting little personality of its own there that I think makes it kind of fun to play. If this had touch sensitivity, that would have made it 4 times as good, I think, and that would have made it really, really nice to play. Let's switch to an organ sound here, and I'll demonstrate the, what's it called? The expression pedal that it came with. So basically the way the expression pedal works, if you're unfamiliar with the concept of an expression pedal, is it's basically, I've heard it described as a gas pedal for your instrument, which is really funny. So it's basically just a volume pedal. So when you have it in this position, it's quiet, and you tilt it forwards and it gives more and more volume. So as I tilt this forwards, it gives me more volume. And if I pull it back, it gives me less volume. As you can hear though, you can still hear the sound, and that's because to make it completely quiet, you have to mash your heel into the back of it, and then you will hear very little volume. So it's not the best expression pedal. It might not be working perfectly after 40 years, but it does do expression pedal things, but as a general rule, I don't really use it that much. But it does in fact work, and that is the Casiotone's included expression pedal. And the sustain pedal, as you heard on the piano, works just like any sustain pedal we'd have today. The sustain of this instrument on these plucked sounds is quite short. I'm not sure why it is so short, but nonetheless it is quite short. But that kind of helps you to not get a muddy tone. Another common thing people often talk about with modern digital pianos is polyphony, which is how many different sounds can you play at once. Poly meaning many, and phone meaning sound. So how many different notes can you play physically at once? And the Casiotone 202 has a polyphony of a whopping 8. You can play 8 different keys at once, and then if you go to play a 9th key, it just isn't going to make any sound. At least I'm pretty sure that's the limit. It might be 9, but it's somewhere in the ballpark. I'm pretty sure it's less than 10. However, because this doesn't have any layering capabilities, you can't layer 2 of these together, and you can't really hold the pedal down, and because the notes decay fast anyway, they're probably going to be dead long before your polyphony runs out. So I haven't really run into that many issues with polyphony causing notes to cut out. But of course, if you were to play a big chord and do some big chord changer with the pedals held down, you would definitely hear notes getting cut out. But because the decay is short anyway, you hardly even notice it because the decay is so short that the note would probably have already decayed by the time the polyphony cuts it out anyway. So maybe that's why the decay is so short, is to hide the small polyphony of this instrument. Pretty sure back in these days, polyphony was actually pretty new of a thing. So the fact that it has 8 is actually pretty cool. It means that you can play a lot of different classical repertoire on this instrument, especially Baroque music and stuff, and it works. You can actually do it. Let's run through some of these plucked sounds here. So what you heard now is the piano. Let's hear the electric piano. So that's the electric piano. I guess it sounds kind of like a Wurlitzer, but it really doesn't, to be honest. But it's still kind of fun. Here's piano 2. A slightly brighter, pluckier version of the original piano. Here's funky clavinet. Up next is the celesta sound. Which is interesting. Up next is clavichord. Although that sounds really nothing like an actual clavichord, this is one of the few instruments I have ever seen that actually has a clavichord sound of some type. A lot of digital pianos these days have electric clavichord, which is the clavinet, and almost all of them have a harpsichord, but very few have a clavichord sound. And this is one of the few digital instruments I've ever seen that has one, regardless of how bad it sounds. It has a clavichord sound, which is unique in itself. Up next is harpsichord, which is actually reasonably good. You can hear that there's kind of two sounds, two frequencies going at once. I guess you'd consider them to be oscillators. You've got one that's a higher pitched sound and one that's a lower pitched, longer sustaining sound. And if that higher pitched sound is sustained for longer, this would genuinely be an actual close interpretation of a harpsichord to some extent. The action really doesn't do trills that well, but that is what that harpsichord sound is. Up next is the second variation. If it had a low B down there, I wouldn't have messed up, but I kept getting thrown off because I'm supposed to play a low B down here that doesn't actually exist. I should have played it an octave higher. One thing this instrument is missing that would have been really cool is an octave shift. I think that would have really opened up the registers. Not only could you get weird, funky sounds in the upper and lower registers, but you could also be able to shift this whole instrument down an octave and then play it up here and have enough keys to play the proper notes, but have it be at the proper range as well, or at least sound better. Here is a synth sound. And it literally is labeled synth sound with an E after synth. Here's a couple of harp sounds. You could hear there the polyphony did actually get cut off by what I was doing. Up next is some Japanese ethnic instruments. You got koto. You got two variations of the koto. You have electrical sound 1. You have a Taisho koto. And then you have 3 different guitars. Actually, 5 guitars. 7 guitars. 7 guitars with a banjo thrown in the middle for some reason. Then there's 2 electric guitars. A 3rd electric guitar. And finally, one of my favorites on the whole instrument, which is the electric bass. Again, if this instrument had some lower keys and some touch sensitivity, that would be a blast to play. Then you have the black keys as well, which are I'm going to call them permanently sustaining instrument. You got the woodwinds, you got the pipe organs, and things of that nature. We've heard pipe organ 1 already. And again, if you had an octave shift so you could play it in this lower register, it would sound way better. But I'm out of keys already. At least I think it would sound better. But maybe they cut that out because the synthesis doesn't work very well for the lower keys. I'm not sure. Here's pipe organ 2. Here's pipe organ 3. What should we play here? Let's do some... expression pedal. Here's electric organ. Might have skipped pipe organ 4. We'll go back and poke that a bit. Then here's pipe organ 4, in case I missed that one. That one's a bit lower than the other ones. See, that Bach chorale sounds much better at that octave than it does at this one. Here's bandoneon and accordion. You have bagpipe, of all things. You have oboe and clarinet. You have a flute, which is another one of my favorites. Let's see here. What else can we do? Let's do this. You got the shakuhachi. And that's what I mean by infinite sustain. You can hold the pedal down and they will sustain infinitely compared to all the instruments on the white keys, which will decay over time. Up next, you got some brass instruments. You got the horn, the flugelhorn. Sounds very similar to the horn. You got the trumpet. You got just generic brass. And another one of my favorites, the bass. You've also got cello. Viola. And violin. That's the expression pedal there, fading those out. And those are all the sounds of the Casiotone 202. It is a very, very simple instrument, but I thought it's been really fun to take a look at this interesting unplayed instrument from 1981, and to take a look and see what it was like to buy an instrument back then. So I think before we leave the video, I think we should pose an interesting question. And that question is, how does this compare to a modern instrument? What are the benefits of this instrument and what are the drawbacks of it? And how does it compare cost-wise to an instrument? Well, I paid around $300 for this instrument. I think it was a little bit more with shipping. And for that price, to buy a new instrument, there's a few different options. But one thing that would be definitely true is that the build quality of, I think, any modern instrument at that price point wouldn't be as high as it would be for this. For example, the underside of this instrument is actually wood, and it's not just, particle board like it is on, say, the SV2 and things of that nature. It's actually legitimate plywood. So they used actual plywood. You can see the wood grain on it through the paint. They used actual plywood for the underside. The outside casing here is plastic, but it's not, it's not horrible. It does have some flex to it, but it's not a horribly cheap feeling plastic. The speaker here is actually quite adequate. Yes, there's only one speaker, but it's reasonably loud, and it does have some distortion with certain sounds, but it's not as bad as you find in much more expensive high-end digital pianos today. The Kawai ES920 and ES520, for example, and the P515 and the 125, all those have a lot more distortion with some of the sounds than this instrument does from 40 years ago with its one tiny speaker, and those have, multiple big speakers in them. So I think that's also pretty impressive as well. And the appearance of it is quite nice. Now, obviously, there's quite a few limitations. Your tone memory switching isn't ideal. Your tones in there aren't ideal either. And the Action has no touch sensitivity. If it had touch sensitivity, this thing would be awesome. But unfortunately, it doesn't, so you're not really able to play, a lot of cool things. You do have the expression pedal that you can kind of use to get some dynamics out of the thing, but you can't really use it as effectively as you could with, actual touch sensitivity. So that has been my review of the Casiotone 202, and when you look at it from the aspect of comparing it to a modern instrument, you can definitely tell that, it's not the same as what we have today. But if you look at it through the eyes of 1981, it's actually quite impressive, and many things about it actually still do hold up well against a modern instrument. For example, the build quality, which I think I've already mentioned, is actually quite nice. You've got the plywood underside, you've got a solid plastic outer case, you've got the little metal music desk, which at first glance appears underwhelming, but actually is perfectly functional. You've got a simple user interface, and probably perhaps the best thing about it is this case. Find me a new digital piano that has a case that's this cool, and I'll probably want to buy it because this is amazing. It looks professional. It's like a professional, almost like a guitar style case. It's a really cool case. That alone makes this really amazing. The feel of the Action, although it has no touch sensitivity, and that is a bit of a sad thing, the feel of the Action itself is actually really great. It's quiet, right? It makes a little bit of noise, but that's really respectable. It's almost whisper quiet. And the feel of the Action itself is nice. You got the big full keys, and the sound of the internal speaker, which you just heard, that was the sound of the internal speaker, is actually quite nice. And some of the distortion that I thought I was hearing earlier seems to have been coming from the sound itself, not actually the internal speaker. So the speaker may be even better than I thought it was. And if you think about it also in this way, not only is this from 1981 when electronic digital instruments were still relatively primitive, Casio went from making watches and calculators to making this in a matter of years. Just a couple of years. They came out with the 201, which was their first ever musical instrument in 1980. 1981, they came out with this, which was basically the original, revised, more attractive, and with more sounds. So they went from making watches and calculators to this, which is an actual musical instrument you can actually make music with, and they've now become a very competitive brand in the market of electronic digital instruments today. I was talking with someone a while back who used to be very closely affiliated with Yamaha. He isn't anymore, but he once was, and he was when I was talking with him then. And we were talking about Yamaha and the future and what Yamaha is going to be doing in the future. And we kind of got onto the topic of Yamaha's competition with other brands. And he told me that Yamaha's biggest competition in the digital piano market isn't Kawai or Nord, it's Casio. Casio, he believed, was Yamaha's biggest competitor. And that's actually really impressive. Again, from watches and calculators to competing with Yamaha, in over 40 years, that's very impressive. And so although this instrument may be humble and it may be very simple compared to what Casio has today, Casio wouldn't be where they are today without an instrument like this. And I think that's part of the reason why I like it for what it is. Yes, it's cheesy. Yes, it's limited. Yes, your vibrato effects are goofy. But that's what makes it cool. It's a little bit of Casio's history. It's a little bit of synth history as well, because the synthesis used is a uncommon type of synthesis from what I've been able to learn. It's just an interesting little piece of gear, and I think it also looks really nice as well. And the professional presentation of it is excellent. Again, the case. I love the case. It is amazing. So it even has a key. It's a simple key, but it's cool. It's got a key, find me a keyboard now that does that. Yes, you have flight cases you can get aftermarket, but a keyboard that comes with its own case just out of the box. That's awesome. That's really cool. So I think as a whole, especially for the time period, Casio did a really, really great job with this. And I just think it's cool. I just really enjoy this for what it is. And I really hope that you guys did too. This has been my review of the Casiotone 202. And if you want to see me do more videos on unusual and interesting gear, especially that's old stuff, let me know, and I will do more videos like this. I've got a couple of other things planned, some interesting organs and stuff from even before this time period that are also in very good condition and are somewhat rare. And so we'll be taking a look at those in future videos, and on those videos and on this one, leave me suggestions for cool, interesting gear, especially if it's pretty affordable, from the past that you would like me to take a look at. Maybe it's something you owned as a child or you owned as a younger adult, and you used to have it and you liked it and you wanted to see what my opinions of were it. Something like that. Let me know what other interesting equipment from the past you think I should review, and with that, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Casio adds to its full line of keyboards the new Casiotone 202, the most versatile and affordable keyboard ever to be designed. Every musician, whether they specialize in keyboard or just fill in with a few lines now and then, are finding Casiotone keyboards the easiest to play, regardless of the style of music performed. The 202 features 49 different instrument sounds. Using a mode selector, you can change each key into a switch that is assigned one of the instrument sounds. You record the sound you want into one of the 4 memory switches and return to the play mode. Now you can bring up your selected voices instantly as you play or make individual substitutions as needed. Here are just a few of the 202's sounds. First, there are traditional keyboard sounds, 3 electronic pianos, funky clav keyboards, organs, celeste, harpsichords, and synthesizer. Next, there are strings, bass, cello, viola, and violin, made even more effective by the addition of one of the 3 possible vibratos. Plucked strings not found on any other keyboard include 4 kotos, and 4 harps. The instruments of the woodwind and brass families let you branch into many styles of playing. The Casiotone 202 is the only keyboard with 10 guitar voices as well as an electric bass that helps you fill out your performance group even more. The 202 can be added to your multi-keyboard stack, providing a wide range of new sounds, not a duplication of what you already own. In the studio, the 202 is quiet, reliable, and flexible. By the way, it has its own monitor speaker, is tunable, and weighs an amazing 16 pounds. A wide variety of accessories are available too. All the sounds on this recording, except for the percussion tracks, were produced entirely with the 202 and a little reverb and some overdubbing of parts. Polyphonic keyboard playing has finally come into a price range any musician can afford. See the Casiotone 202 wherever the entire line of keyboards from Casio are sold.